Just some quick thoughts about, what at least from that seat right there, I think I saw in the past 2.5 days. And I kind of compared notes with, some other people that played a key role in organizing the workshop. And if things that you see here resonated with you, it's because all of us thought that was really smart. If you see things here that are really dumb, it came straight out of my brain. So it's purely my fault. Just sort of a quick overview. There we go. We had this keynote on Sunday night, and then it was followed by, quite serendipitously, by a presentation from Bob Ciotti the next day, and I thought there was sort of an interesting counterpoint there. The one thing that I didn't tape record Dr. Sterling's presentation, so I couldn't quote him, so I picked on this one because I did get that quote, Moore's Law is dead, which was really his way of saying, evolution may not cut it. We really need to think about how we're going to revolutionarily change things. And then Bob said the next day, we got this Pleiades thing and we're just going to keep on growing it and building it. I thought that was kind of interesting. The other part about it was, is there a chasm here or a continuum? Are we, about to, enter into this chasm where we got to do something totally different, or do we just keep evolving over time? And the other point that sort of came out of this was this notion about, as exascale gets bigger and bigger and bigger, what we really have is more and more and more specialized clusters. Someone had a cute expression for that, but I forget at the moment what it was, but stunt clusters, which I thought was really kind of neat. So that was one takeaway for me Sunday. This one came out somewhere in the conversation. I don't know that people really noticed it, so I thought I'd mention it here, but every single instruction being executed, every header byte that's being moved costs picojoules. And it's a little bit like the federal budget, a billion here, a billion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real joules, especially in an exascale world. So the takeaway was power really matters. We all know that, but I think it's worth sort of paying attention to it. I think Sean has been very sensitive to this when he talks about, we really need to reduce the number of bytes that we're moving around in the process. So anyway, that was one. Power matters. Let's not forget that. We had some sessions, say no more, storage, storage, storage. If people don't think storage is important, you probably need a different workshop, because it came through pretty clear that we've got some work to do here in the storage world. We did go looking for disruptive technologies. You could put this in the category of looking for trouble, and we found it, which was the objective. We were looking for trouble, and we found it. We had this really great series of presentations on NVM. We didn't have the fourth one. Unfortunately, Bob Pearson had to flee running because he had a pressing customer engagement he could not get out of. But the message was clear nonetheless that NVM is going to be a disruptive technology. It's going to disrupt the way that we think about I/O, and we need to do something about that. And so we placed that ball squarely in the tax court. And I think I heard Tom say, I got it. Yeah, okay. So here we're gonna watch the TAC do what it does so well, which is to serve as sort of the furnace or the annealing function for the OpenFabrics Alliance to help us figure out what to do with this thing that's breathing down our necks. This was sort of a topic that came up a couple of times during the course of the past couple of days. You may have noticed a lot of shouting over the past day or two. This big topic, how do we continue to evolve OpenFabrics software going forward? And this is a not-so-veiled reference to what I think Frank Berry coined the OFA wig, which I kind of like that expression. The OFI working group, we had a number of sessions on it. Everyone agrees on this idea that we have to move to some, have to keep evolving somehow or other. We all agree on the broad outlines of the objectives. What we don't necessarily agree on yet is how to get there. And I just wanted to point out that there's this really noisy discussion happening on, and that noisy discussion shouldn't be taken for anything other than normal open source methods for driving towards consensus and agreement. So we got this idea at the high level, we want to do this, now we're arguing about how to do it. And that's a very healthy and productive discussion, which I think we really want to encourage in workshops just like this one. So this is what happens in an open source world. Just to elaborate on that a little bit more, because there has been a little bit of confusion about this, which is fine, because part of open source is thinking in public. When you think out loud, when you think in public, you're often misunderstood and things get said and with one intention and received with another and so on. But as expected, you would expect this to happen. But you roll the clock back to about this time last year at the workshop, the whole idea with what turned into the OFA WIG was to start by thinking how to extend the high-performance networking paradigm. And I think that there were some who were very specific about this, that you wanted to start with a clean sheet of paper in order to be sure that, we didn't constrain our thought process by what we already know. If you start with what you already know, the odds are pretty good what you get is what you already know. So the idea here was specifically to start by not constraining the thought process to what exists today. And out of that emerged this notion of a framework. But I want to be clear about that next point there. It was never the intention to create a fork. And I think this is where we haven't been especially clear about that. And as we've heard the feedback over the past couple of days and the face-to-face meeting we had Monday night, it was clear that there's a fair amount of confusion about that point. It was never the idea to create a fork. As we talked about this bullet, I'm not a software guy, but others are. It was suggested that we should describe this in terms of a fork versus a branch, because software guys will get what a branch means. Branches tend to do this, they go apart and then they converge again, where forks do this. And we are not creating a fork, at least that's not the idea here. But the question now before us is, and this is sort of where we are in the process, we've got this idea of what's going on and this framework thing. How does this thought experiment that we've created to this point relate to what we have today? How do we make it relate to verbs? I say make it relate to verbs. That sounds like we have to torture it. We don't. It's intended to be a natural extension. So I hope that's pretty clear. Speaking of evolution, for those who are wondering about the future of RDMA going forward, there were some pretty powerful sessions in the past day or so on topics like bonding, dynamic connected transport, on-demand paging, and so forth. So if anybody's wondering about where we're going with RDMA, it's moving. Let there be no mistake about that. I thought those sessions were very much what you would hope to see at a workshop like this, very detailed, low-level discussions about important topics that matter to all of us. Last year, we did embark on this objective to broaden the scope of OpenFabrics software, and we introduced this idea of application-centric I/O, and we accepted a challenge from, I think it was Bill Magro, that what if the software leads and so on. And this year, we took that same idea and we made that tent even a little bit bigger by introducing this notion of interest groups. And when I say made the tent bigger, what I meant was, there's more to the world here than just developers. We're really good at what we do, but there's people who are impacted by what we do and who have significant input into what we do. And that led to this notion of interest groups. So we're broadening the tent here. And I'm sort of hoping that as we think about planning next year's workshop, and by the way, I'd like to invite anybody on Bill Lee's behalf who has an interest to participate in the planning of these workshops. If you got the cycles to spare, we could use your brain power. But maybe that's something we should be thinking about for next year. I just sprang this on Bill. I don't know if he thinks that's a good idea or not. But and the other thing that came out for me, I think, was in the context of interest groups. So yeah, there's this other interest group that we sort of forgot that is not well represented by people that deploy OpenFabrics software or people that develop OpenFabrics software. But there is a distinct and identifiable community represented by the national labs and NASA. And we should really be thinking about them as a distinct interest group and be sure that they continue to have a path to engage with and influence the direction of open source going forward, OpenFabrics software going forward. It's a very important point. They keep trying. Bob's here every year. Susan's here every year. The labs engage all the time. Let's make sure we're leveraging that input and making the best use of it. This was a picture that came up that I thought was pretty astonishing. At least it jumped out at me. It was in the context of NVM. Doug Vogt put this picture up. But the message here was that pretty quickly, software becomes the predominant factor. Or maybe not pretty quickly. It's taken a long time to get here. But I just wonder if we're not about to get clobbered by this exact same observation. No one that I know of has done any studies that says, yeah, this is true. But it certainly stands to reason. And if that's the case, what we're doing here becomes more and more and more important. So if you're wondering about the value of your time spent with the OpenFabrics Alliance, wonder no more. There was an ad hoc meeting of one of the OpenFabrics Alliance's working groups, which happened to be the OFA WIG. We took advantage of the opportunity here. And astonishingly to me, 50 people showed up. That's more than half the people who registered for the conference as a whole. But that was pretty astonishing. And it made me think that maybe next year this idea of integrating the working groups and what they're actually doing into the workshop agenda may be a bona fide part of the workshop going forward. And the other takeaway was maybe we should get a bigger room. So we were pretty packed last night, but you're supposed to laugh at that. That was a joke. Thank you. So those were sort of my high-level takeaways, and I think you can sort of see the beginnings of where next year's workshop goes based on where we are this year, and I think that's sort of the goal here, what we're looking for. So I'm excited, and I think next year is going to be a lot of fun, so looking forward to seeing you all here next year.
Thank you so much for your attendance. I thought it was a good show overall, and it's very much of it comes from the quality of the audience, the quality of the questions, and the interaction, the conversation outside. I think it's why it makes the trip out here worthwhile. And Bill, just stand up for a minute and take a bow.